Okay, thank you and welcome to the Monday, June 3rd, 2024 Council Committee meeting and Council Budget Workshop. We weren't together last week for the holiday, and I'm sure that was a nice event for everybody, staff and councilors and citizens included. So roll call show Councilor Baker is present, Councilor Larway, Councilor Powers, Councilor Demerit, Councilor Kenny, and joining us on by Zoom is Councilor Marks, and I saw Councilor Berthel. Can you both hear us okay? Thumbs up, Sarah. Great. Thank you very much for joining. And at Cornell, we'll start with the Community Development Committee meeting and a update on the Regional Climate Action Plan. Great. Folks can introduce themselves and we'll get started.
Mitch Stone, Director of Community Economic Development. I'm here with Maddie Jensen from BAX. So we wanted to bring the Regional Climate Action Plan to you and also talk about next steps and how we would like to do that. Maddie has a presentation that you can go through, and then I believe that Isabel may be joining us to talk about how we can institute that through, there she is, through the comp plan process. Some of the things that aren't there. There were some things on the agenda. One of those was also a summary of climate actions. Megan Hess added kind of some low-hanging fruit things that she's already done, and we'll continue to look at how they could do that. But some of these are really kind of bigger things on there. So I'll turn it over to Maddie and then we'll walk through, and if we have questions, we know that we got some other things on the agenda, so we're hoping to get through this pretty quick.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm Maddie Jensen. I've been here a couple times before, I think most recently in December, I believe. So a lot of this information you might already know, so I'll try to kind of speed through some of that. If you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. So as you know, Orono and the city of Bangor and BAX partnered on a climate action plan for the region, and we've just completed that in March. And so today I just wanted to go through some of the highlights of the plan recommendations and some next steps that we have. Next slide. Yep. So for our project deliverables, phase 1 was completed back in 2022, and this last year was focused on phase 2. So the actual climate action plan recommendations. And so in that we have a couple of different documents that you can review on our climate action website. So we have an executive summary, which just kind of goes through the whole process. And then we also created a suite of climate action strategy recommendations. There's about 40 of them, and they're kind of split into 2 different areas. So we have 10 climate action toolkits, which we'll be focusing on more so today. And then the remaining 30 or so are in Appendix A, which is, all of the other strategies that weren't, as much of a priority that are still important, but not prioritized by the community. And then also, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about all of the public engagement that went into this process, you can look at Appendix B, our community process memo. And then we also did a greenhouse gas emissions model to show kind of how the impacts of the strategies that we recommended would have on our emissions. I'll get into that a little bit later, but if you're interested in the methodology and kind of the nitty-gritty of how that model was developed, Appendix C would be the place that you would look that up. Next slide, please. So as I said, we have a whole suite of strategies, but these 10 climate action toolkits were identified through a whole host of community engagement activities as being some of the top priorities for the community and some of the highest impact strategies. So not the only things that we hope Orono will look at, but some of the kind of first swings that we'd like you all to take. Next slide, please. And so within those toolkits, we hope that there will be resources that will help kickstart implementation as quickly and easily as possible. And so in that, there's resources about first steps that you can take to start implementing the strategy, what key partners would be important to engage, precedents, examples, any sort of resources that might also be helpful to, again, kickstart implementation for some of these big tasks. Next slide, please. All right, so we kind of split up the toolkits into kind of categories based on the topic area. And so for buildings and energy use, we have toolkit number 1 and 2. about 60% of our region's greenhouse gas emissions come from building energy use. And so these are gonna be particularly important, particularly big hitters for us reducing those emissions. And then also obviously housing and, where people live is, hugely impactful for resilience generally. So again, these are some of the most important strategies that we identified. And so in these, we focused on updating zoning and new development standards so that we're not continuing to build buildings and homes that are in the floodplain, that aren't using sustainable, materials and good, energy use standards, so that we don't have to go back and fix them in the future. And then our retrofitting housing toolkit is focused on energy efficiency and reducing the emissions associated with this, building sector. Next slide, please. Thank you. Toolkits number 3, 4, and 5 are transportation toolkits. So number 3 is around our public transit capacity. We identified, of course, a lot of interest in expanding public transit. However, given, the financial burden of this and some capacity issues that we've seen with Community Connector recently, we didn't want to just recommend expanding transit. We wanted to really be strategic with how we approach that. And so this specific strategy is really about finding any sort of efficiencies in the way that we're currently running our system, hopefully reduce costs or, reduce staff capacity as much as possible to hopefully in the future be able to start making those steps for expansion. And then we have a number of partnerships and ways that we could promote active and public transportation. So whether that's, working with businesses or updating our zoning to and expand density, or to make things set up in a way that people can walk or use transit a little bit easier, rather than things being so spread out that a personal vehicle is really kind of the best option. So that's toolkit number 4 and 5. Again, these are another kind of heavy hitter for greenhouse gas emissions, and that transportation is responsible for about 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions locally. And of course, resilience as well, and that folks need to get around the region to go to work, get groceries, healthcare, and so ways that we can support them doing that is going to be important. Next slide. Toolkit number 6 is our land management. So any sort of way that we can promote better land management practices at the municipal level with the land that the town owns and manages, but even at the private level. So what can individual homeowners do on their own property that is going to contribute to our overall goals? And earlier I was talking about how our emissions are largely in transportation and building energy use. Well, this region already is sequestering about 1/3 of the emissions that we are responsible for. And so we, of course, want to protect that potential so that we don't have to go back and be reducing as much as we are already sequestering. So any way that we can formally protect those forests and wetlands would ultimately help us reach our goal. Next slide. Toolkit number 7 and 8 is our kind of economic development and workforce toolkits. We heard a lot from businesses that they would love to be more sustainable, and to, their clients are looking for those sorts of resources and products, but they just don't know how to do that. And so our toolkit number 7 is around creating a sustainable business resource, giving folks the information that they need to be making these decisions, and also protecting their businesses in the face of flooding and supply chain issues, rising costs, all those sorts of things. And then toolkit number 8, strengthening our green trades pipeline. This is going to be especially important to support toolkit number 2, our retrofitting housing. We have heard, of course, a lot, and if any of you have tried to install a heat pump or do any sort of improvement on your home, that there is a labor shortage or, a shortage of skilled tradespeople to do that work. And so if we want to expand that locally, we're going to need the tradespeople to be able to support that. So any ways that we can partner with any of the universities or colleges in the area and promote kind of that pipeline from school to the work that we know already needs to be done in this region. Next slide. Okay, and finally, toolkit number 9 and 10, all are about community resilience. So we have our expanding resilience hub. We know that we anticipate seeing more severe and extreme storms from climate change impacts. And so we want to make sure that our residents have, a place to go to that has resources to prepare for, a storm before it happens, while it's happening, and then to recover from those, extreme hazardous events after the fact. And so there are a number of ways that we can do this. There are already organizations doing this work in the region. So we just want to be supporting that work and connecting people to those resources. And then similarly with strengthening food resilience, we know that there are people who are food insecure in the region, and we don't expect that to go down with increasing supply chain issues, rising costs, all of those things. And so this toolkit is about connecting people again to the resources that already exist. So these two toolkits are things that the town may not be able to do on its own and maybe shouldn't do on their own. As I said, there's so many organizations already doing this work. And so I think, the best position for the town is to really amplify those resources and connect people to those resources. Next slide. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, we created a greenhouse gas emissions model to show the impact of the strategies that we've recommended, as well as a couple state and federal initiatives that are happening right now. And so it's a little bit hard to see on the graph, but the state of Maine has adopted goals for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And so you can see those two kind of horizontal lines going across, and then those colored wedges show the emissions reductions potential of the different strategies that we've recommended. And so the state has put out a goal of reducing our emissions by 80% by 2050, which is that bottom kind of darker green line, which you can see based on the assumptions of the model, we're just barely missing. We're at about 73% of a decrease in emissions. And so this is kind of just helpful to show us that based on the assumptions of the model, we may need to pursue things more aggressively or quickly, not meant to, be discouraging or take us away from those goals, but just information for us to consider as we go forward. Next slide. All right, actions to get started. We're at the end here. This is sort of the blanket recommendations that we're making. And luckily for Orono, you guys are already ahead, I think, on every single one of these. So identify a local game plan. This is, I think, largely going to come into play with the comprehensive plan process that you are getting started on. And so I think you're in a really good position in that we've already had all of this public engagement for this climate action plan, and you're going to have another round of strategization and prioritization in that process. And so I think it makes sense to incorporate this plan into your comprehensive plan as that's developed. And then adopt a resolution committing to climate action. You all have already done that when you applied for the community action grant, which funded this project. And then finally, assign a municipal staff person to the climate action committee that we're creating to support implementation for this plan, which we actually, this is a little bit outdated. We actually just had our first meeting last week, and Megan Hess is the Orono representative on that committee. So I know that's a lot of information. Hopefully you've been keeping up to date as we develop the process. Hopefully you're happy with the results, but really can't stress enough how much Orono staff and the community members in Orono have contributed to this process. I mean, invaluable expertise and perspectives that have shaped this plan. So I think it's relevant to you all.
So just two notes, and I want to thank Maddie and all of PAX for all the work they've done, and they kind of stepped a little bit outside of what they normally do to take this on for the region, and it's been very helpful. I think one of the things that came to light when they completed the plan was there are certain things that municipalities can do, but there are certain things that we have to tackle regionally, and we didn't want those to disappear. So one of the things that came out of a lot of follow-up was the idea of this, the Climate Action Committee, to help represent the region and look at how do we deal with regional issues and solving those problems. So I think that's one big thing. And I think the other piece of this is that we are in a perfect kind of timing wise to be able to implement this and bring it into our comprehensive plan and look at the pieces and how to integrate that into that process. You might have heard that Bangor adopted this and then they did an addendum to their comprehensive plan. We don't have to do that because they had already completed their comprehensive plan. So they wanted to add it in and they added the whole thing. So this is as a great opportunity of not only Megan has already done a lot of work to kind of pick off the low hanging fruit. And if you look at the document, there's been something done in every one of the toolkits already. Except for the two business ones, which are really regional, need to be attacked regionally. And then, you know, I had Isabel come because I thought maybe she could talk really quickly just about how this can be implemented and brought into the comprehensive plan conversation, much like a lot of the other regional plans. I don't know if you want to take a second, Isabel, to just kind of touch on that.
Yeah, I think in terms of next steps, we're really lucky that this plan honestly sort of did a lot of the work that we'll end up doing in phase 3, the policy making process of the plan. You know, we already have a lot of those strategies that I would have had to draft with the comprehensive plan committee because of this plan, especially related to, you know, all of the toolkits that Maddie just mentioned. So, you know, we can use that as just dropping it into the plan or at least as a kickoff point for further conversations locally to understand, you know, how the strategies will come into play. But yeah, I mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head, Mitch. Like a lot of this work will end up coming into play as sort of a strategy piece with the comprehensive plan in phase 3.
Just leave it if you had any questions.
Sure. Sure. It's we are got a big agenda with our budget in front of us, so it's tough to be the lead in, you know, it's like who's opening for Taylor Swift, you know, so that's a lot of energy will go into that for our discussions today. But does anyone have questions about?
I don't have any questions, but I'm very excited about this, and I'm still digging through all of the amazing materials you all developed. And I'm very glad Isabel is here and is aware of this, and I'm looking forward to the comprehensive plan process as we figure out how to integrate this. I have very rough ideas of what that means right now, but I'm excited. This is really robust and well formatted, and I think really accessible for people to look at and understand the work that's been done. So thank you.
I know it's helpful to see.
I just wanted to
Go ahead, Sonia.
chime in. Sure, I'll chime in and sort of echo Rob and also say I think it's so wonderful that this has been such a participatory process because having folks who are going to be implementing and using solutions be part of designing what's actually going to work makes it that much more effective down the road when we're trying to mitigate and trying to make real progress. And so that this groundwork that's being done that can plug into the comprehensive plan is really tremendous. And thanks to everyone who's been part of making.
I like seeing some of the things come together in Megan's report too about the steps that are already been taken. Lisa showed me around the food cupboard on Saturday, which is just a great resource. And I had a chance to read the resiliency report that came together that Megan shared with us through Cornell. So it's good to see it all come together, and I'm eager to talk more about how we talk about it comprehensively so that we show that as a community we're taking action, and that people have an opportunity to participate in Orono's response as part of the region.
I have one quick selfish question. I know that we're going to, one of the big components to get this down to that 80% in your graph is to integrate zero emission vehicles. And I realize we have a high emission like corridor from here to Bangor. That would be the freeway. And we could have a low emissions corridor in Route 2 to get to Bangor and get to here, but the speed limit's too high to use a local, small, cheap electric vehicle to make that commute. And I'm just wondering if there's been any talk about ways we could change the corridor when we have 2 here about making it so that people could buy very inexpensive electric vehicles for short distance travel, which would be between Bangor and here.
Yeah, I don't believe that that was discussed specifically. I think our working groups, at least for the toolkits, wanted to focus on public transportation and active transportation, mostly for like an equity concerns. But I think there's plenty of room to see how electric vehicles expand with all the state and federal initiatives that there are right now. But yeah, I think something to explore.
Sorry, Dan,
No,
move on,
all right.
So
Anybody
I don't
else?
have an answer for you.
right?
We
Curious.
appreciate you bringing this forward and keeping us updated.
Yeah, thank you all.
Isabel, thanks for joining us.
No, I don't.
Did you?
No.
Okay. All right, the next item on our agenda is the council budget workshop. We're gonna review the municipal budget, have final discussions about fee schedules, other related items for our public hearing next week. So the hope for today's meeting is to review the work that council has done over the preceding 2 weeks since we had for those who haven't been following this closely, we had a meeting on, here comes Zach. We had a meeting, our last meeting was May 21st, where we had, at the end of that presentation, we had a discussion, a council discussion about what our priorities and interests were moving forward. So as part of that, we'll talk about kind of our responses. Jacob and I were tasked by the council to put together some ideas. Leo brought in some more additional ideas today in terms of where we'll go with the budget. And when we're done today, we'll give staff direction on what those numbers should be coming into our public hearing. And then have a brief discussion about the types of things we want to bring into the public hearing from staff and from council, including the work, the document that Jacob and Sarah worked on together in terms of the impact on the tax impact on spending and things like that. So with that, Cornell, do you have any thoughts on where you want to start?
Well, I just wanted to let you know that Zach found last year, the council carried forward a number of items along with, it was included in that Union Street boat launch. The
signage, the
signage,
foundation.
50,000 signage. Well, in there, the get care of the dog donation, Big Park Reserve, but in there was $10,000 to revive Orono Festival Days. So I know you could talk about adding something in for the community event, so that could take that place. Also, in a later order, you carried some other items. In there was 11,500 for the flash vote and 9,000 for the council chamber project, which I understand you.
Council
moved.
chambers, right?
No, it just says chamber.
Oh, okay. But this room here,
Yeah.
sorry,
But, so, and that was combined with the flash vote. So, because council declined to do that work, so it was included in flash vote. So you have $20,500.
Oh.
Used for that.
and then how much was the first figure?
10,000.
10,000 for the festival event. Yes. Then, Jacob, before we dive into that, do you have anything you want to share on the document that we worked on together based on the feedback we got from council?
Only to say that I had really, high hopes that, we could really find some easy cuts to make. And this being my first budget cycle, I think I was being a little bit naive. So you all did a phenomenal job. There wasn't really a lot there to work with. So, I appreciate the budget as it was presented, and I think Leo has some additional good suggestions that I, hadn't thought of, but generally speaking, I think that, Dan and I did the best with what we had to go with.
I would say from the conversation I had with Cornell, and I don't know if everyone has the document in front of them that we shared on Friday, but I've got a few copies that people need them. But one thing that Cornell and I talked about today was perhaps it's certainly not the first time, and I promise you it won't be the last time I'll put the cart before the horse. But in the document that Jacob and I developed, we assumed that our discussions around a memorandum of understanding with the university for a CPI increase for the pilot would be, makes sense to us. We assume it'll make sense to them.
It's not as easy as we had anticipated.
But given the resources that Cornell and Zach were able to identify, it may make sense for us to zero that out and allow the memorandum of understanding discussions to work their course before we assume revenue. It's maybe not be.
So there's already an MOU discussion, sorry, I was confused by that, okay.
No,
No, there hasn't been one.
Yeah.
You need to have one. I'm saying you need to have one before you assume an escalator clause. So.
Okay,
That's
that
all.
makes sense.
we'll aspire, but not assume, maybe.
Yeah, there you go, okay.
Okay, so that may be, in terms of our notes, I'm putting that down as a 0 for now. But with later on, we'll get into what we could ask our new town manager to do in the new fiscal year as part of our FY 25 budget, budget initiatives. Any other comments on, Leo, you okay? We'll have comments on this, then take up your suggestions.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were gonna go through yours line by line or not, or if that's suggested or, but I think you zeroed it out, cleared it out, made it pretty clear, that the total reduction from you guys' work is 66,000, right?
Yeah.
And then coupled in, which we're now coupling out that 19,600 of potential revenue. So that's, so your total change was the 66,000.
Yeah.
And, in here, you and I spoke briefly, Dan, just that cutting out and adding in the 50,000 to me, I didn't, all of my changes are obviously just cuts. I didn't add programming back. I think I'm a little, this seems a little weird, us getting into spending the $5,000 from reserves. That felt a little off to me, but I guess overall, okay, that's all, I guess, then we'll talk about.
Sure. Anyone else here in terms of Leo, what Jacob and I presented?
Yeah, what stuck out to me, something that I might even want to increase is actually that central staffing and contracting allocation that is right now at 50,000. If there are going to be no FTE additions, just how you structured that, I think it's important that if we do that, we put in wiggle room for there to be, recognition by the new town manager. If there's work that needs to be done and staff is at capacity, when I know that is an ongoing issue, we need to have some buffer for contracting and other stuff. And I'd be in favor of even raising that line.
Okay.
Allow some flexibility. What were you thinking about? I don't know.
I'm just curious.
What was the question, Matt?
I was just wondering what he was thinking in terms of raising.
In terms of a number?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a number in mind.
Say, in contracting services, I mean, that could disappear pretty quickly.
Sure.
What do you have in mind for contracted services, or do you not have anything in mind?
I don't know. I mean, I just know like the town manager office, we don't have an assistant town manager right now. I don't know. I mean, I think we're leaving that. Right now, I mean, we're doing this budget without the town manager that's gonna be with us, working with this budget, so it's tough. And a lot of people are taking on the work that the assistant town manager was doing. I mean, I don't know enough about how that works. I just want to leave their flexibility for the staff to be able to do the work they need to do if things are tight, especially when we're not putting in the FTEs that have been requested in various places.
And the thought process behind that line item is just to allow Clint some flexibility to come in here, since, we are essentially saying no additional hires. We didn't want to, tie his hands too much. So, if any new, director or manager that comes in will want to make, changes, movements, additions, et cetera. So that those funds were meant to give him the flexibility to be able to, make this his own.
No, I think that came through clearly. I think,
Okay.
the purpose is good, and I appreciate it.
We've kept them, yes,
Dan,
okay,
Don't have documents.
Sure.
That,
Okay.
so if you could be a little more explicit,
yeah, I'll hand them,
being recorded.
sure. Up, and we have some hard copies here for people. in the audience and staff, be able to turn the air conditioner off, that help? Thank you. Cheryl? Thank you.
Maybe you could explain what that. Dan, for
Sure. What I'm
viewing public.
Sure. For those who aren't with us in person, handed out is the bullets that, if you go back and link to our meeting last time, the 21st, kind of the budget priorities that we heard from the council as we had our discussion about where we'd like to see things go. And of course, this is a consensus work. We have to find, we're trying to find ways to do this together. And then, a list of opportunities, adjustments to the budget that total $66,000 in savings. And we could talk through those, but essentially it holds holds FTEs at the current level, doesn't expand FTE. The big picture items is it doesn't increase FTEs at all. It recognizes some savings.
Sorry, just in case there's
Yeah.
anybody who doesn't know what that
Sure.
is.
FTEs are full-time equivalent employees, so there are no increases in the FTE count. And what we do is we set aside what we're calling a town manager central staffing and contracting resource that our new town manager will be able to leverage and work with our staff as they come in. And we talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago in terms of doing a systematic look at the central office needs. We talked about there's interest in exploring what we could do with contracting around some things like maybe mowing and things like that we've heard from. And we want to provide our new town manager and his new team that he'll be inheriting with a chance to take assess those various needs and come back to us, knowing that there are some resources set aside to fund that. So.
Thanks, Dan.
And yep. And to the extent
can I-
that, just 1 second, sorry. So I have talked with Clint, I check in with Clint regularly and he's seen a copy of this and he knows that we're talking about it and, he's interested and eager to work with the staff. He doesn't start till July 8th, so after we act on budget. Sarah, go ahead. Thank you.
No, that was very helpful. Thanks. Sorry on the time lag. I can't always tell when you've paused. Pardon there. I just wanted to follow up on Jacob's comment and also, I guess, Rob's comment on the central office and what you've just explained. I guess I want to say first that I feel much more comfortable with this kind of a fund, which is for contracted work or temporary work, as opposed to adding a position, FTE positions back into the budget. So I feel more comfortable with funds that are clearly temporary, so that if the town manager uses them, there's no understanding that we as a council would keep those positions going into the future. I want to respond to Rob's comment, I guess, just about the short staffing, just to say that if we go back to FY23, so a year ago, as we sat in this budget process, we added a position and a half into the central office. We added a full-time payroll and benefits position in the late summer, early fall. And we added, I don't know if it was 0.6 to the communications position or 0.5, somebody can look that up, but we added a full position and a half. So we took out an assistant manager, that's correct, but we added a position and a half. So we are not short-staffed compared to how we were a year ago. It is possible that we're short-staffed simply because of the amount of work. I'm not questioning that. But I do think it's important to note that we've gone up in central office staffing from a year ago to now. We have not gone down. The only exception to that, of course, would be that our town manager, as an interim town manager, has been here part-time. And that's already being corrected for with our new hire, who will be a full-time town manager again. So even if we add no new FTEs into this budget, we still are at more FTEs in the central office than we were a year ago today. And I think that's important to be clear for ourselves and for the public. If we added what was requested in the first budget presented to us, we would be adding on top of that a full assistant town manager. And again, someone would have to look it up. I'm traveling in Newfoundland at the moment, but I believe it was 0.4 in the clerk's office. So, we're already up 0.6 or 0.5 above what we were a year ago. The original proposal was to add an additional 1.4 on top of that, and to put us up an entire 2 full TEs, two full FTEs beyond what we were in FY23. And to me, that's really concerning, and I'm really glad that we're not doing that. So I want to say a big thanks to Jacob and Dan for taking a look at that, and instead creating a fund that is clearly delineated as one-time funds for the town manager to utilize while they're taking a more systemic look at what needs to happen on our staffing overall. Rob, I would not want to see that number personally any higher. 50K is enough for me on that number. Again, based on the fact that we are up 0.5 or 0.6 FTEs higher than we were a year ago right now. So I don't believe that there's a huge gap in staffing that's been explained to us yet as to what workload has grown so much from last year to this year that we need more staff than we had before. I do understand it was a strange year with a part-time town manager and lots of people adjusting to new roles. And I think that's part of what affects the feeling of workload. And I think we need to let that settle. So I would not be in favor of increasing that 50K any further. I also would like to see it moved out of a council initiatives line and back into the personnel, because I think that's confusing. It's not a council initiative. It's simply money for our town manager to use for contracted personnel or temporary personnel, as I understand it, as he sees fit. And Dan, if you could just answer for me, am I correct in assuming that he cannot use this to create like full-time permanent positions, this money?
You'd have to come back to us with a plan that
Yeah.
we'd have to approve. So, it's not like there would be no higher, there'd be no higher, and that's what's just different about the original budget proposal that came to us, right? He'd have to come back to us with the results of this discussion, so we'd have a chance to weigh in and talk about it. And I think, for me, this was a trying to find a compromise, because I heard, I think we all heard from staff about, needs that are hard to meet and the workload and things like that. So it felt like this was a good opportunity for us to take advantage of the fact that we'll have a new full-time manager with us, beginning of July, and to respect what we've been asked to do by staff in terms of the positions, while also understanding the grave concerns that we all have about Orono's tax burden and not being in a position to increase the full-time, the staffing levels. That will be something that has to be managed year in and year out, because I know that there's a lot of sensitivity on this council about layoffs, and that's something that we are very strongly opposed to, want to avoid.
And also to acknowledge the point that was brought up last time about the assistant town manager last time, did bring in some grant funds, and our environmental person, she's bringing in some grant funds. So acknowledging that there are additional resources out there that we could pursue if somebody had the ability to do that.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
I think it's a good compromise position, Dan and Jacob. I think it's great in that way. So thank you. I like what you did with it.
Can we check in with Sonia, and then we'll go through your, yeah. Sonia, do you have anything for us?
I think most of my thoughts echo some of what's been said before, but I feel comfortable moving forward with this proposal. I shared certainly some of Rob's, sort of real feeling of concern about making sure that our staffing level is adequate to what we expect, and that's fair. And I really liked the idea and appreciate the compromise measure of having this, $50,000 of ability to have some wiggle room in that moving forward.
Yep.
So, yeah, thanks. It's as Jacob said earlier, there are no easy cuts to the budget as proposed, but I would support this moving ahead as you folks have laid it out. So thank you for your work trying to kind of thread that impossible needle for us collectively.
Kind of like trying to feed 60 people with one grill, Sonia, kind of good job last night. I don't know if you're on when I complimented you for your wizardry with the grill at the potluck last night, but it was phenomenal. So-
Yeah, my arms are a little tired, but not too much.
If Zach can find us any more money, we'll have to buy another grill. Sarah, one more,
Dan?
anything else?
Yeah, I just have a question I wanted to clarify. So thanks to Zach and to Cornell for finding those figures from monies that were allocated at the end of last summer. I just wanted to clarify the 66 figure that Leo's quoting on the current plan does not take into account that we would not apparently need to fund a community event because that 10,000 is already set aside in a designated fund right now, correct, Cornell?
Correct.
So that, I don't know if that wasn't 10,000, Dan, in your proposed budget, that was 7, but that 7 could certainly be taken out of that 10 that's already in a designated fund. And
Yep.
likewise for the 10,000 that was to be spent on, I'm not sure what you called it, but basically 360 evaluations and community feedback, which I think you had designated 10,000 for. My understanding is we in fact have 20,000 in a designated fund already that was set aside at the end of last summer for a flash vote and other community engagement feedback strategies. So we also can take that 10,000 out of this year's budget because we have this $20,000 fund we can use for that, correct?
Correct.
Yep. But
Okay,
then we're gonna,
So it would actually be 66 in savings plus 17, whatever that adds to, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thanks a bunch, Cornell.
I just clarify that with the 40,000, the new manager will have. He can study the staffing needs for the assistant town manager position, the clerk's position, and the library position, and then come back with a recommendation to the council to hire.
right. Or contract or whatever the team and he come up with together
Yes.
and bring to us. So,
Can include FTEs.
yes,
That'd be for next year's budget, obviously.
No,
right?
for the FY 25 budget. So it's money, the FY 25 money that could be used for any staffing need that,
25.
We're talking about 25.
Right.
So he can. So there's, okay, you're saying they could come back and spend that 50 on hiring new staff in this current
Yeah.
budget?
if that's what, yeah, that's how it's presented.
I mean, it would likely be, since the proposed budget had the assistant manager starting after January 1, that it would be in the latter part of the year, but it would be in the fiscal year 25 budget.
But he could come to us in an August meeting and say, there, we've come up with this plan and council would react and respond to it, so.
Yeah.
But I
Okay,
assume
so-
it'll take that, but. Go ahead, Sarah.
So that, yeah, sorry. So I get it. So it is possible that it can be a permanent position that's added, but it would require council to take a separate vote on that before that could happen. Correct?
Yes,
And we would expect, I'm assuming, the discussion that I had about where our FTEs have moved in the central office over the last few years to be part of that discussion, correct?
Correct.
yes. Yeah.
Good. I'm good. Thank you.
A little messier, but it's a good compromise.
Yeah, I think yeah. Particularly what the. Yeah, so Leo, what do you have? What would you like us to take a look at?
So I'd send a spreadsheet and I guess.
Do we have some copies that we could share with people or?
Here, I'll pass them out, Leo. There you go. You go, Mr. Coffee.
Thanks. I have mine, yep.
You were on the.
Thanks, you. And in terms of what I passed around, to folks here, the third sheet, that's stapled in were not recommended, but possible changes. That was a look at, what it would take to get, in my view, and Jacob and I looked at things, what, the types of things it would take for us to look at. So those things are not in the discussion we've had so far. Now we're gonna talk about some ideas that Councilor Kenny's gonna bring to us.
So we can start on the operating page and I came up with 145 and these were guesstimates basically so some of them look high probably. The town, the assistant town manager, I put at 70 with even half a year with benefits and salary for half a year, but maybe that's high, maybe it's not.
It's a little high.
What's that?
I think it's the ballpark.
Is it, yeah,
Oh, with benefits.
with benefits and stuff, I would
With the tip.
maybe six, well, either way, it's salary, I guess, depending on where it comes from is less relevant to this conversation, I think, whether. it comes
You're just
from the
basically eliminating the position.
Yeah, which I mean, correct, yep. And then the same with the other part-time position, so it's in line with not adding new positions. I did have a question about how this will work for, currently, we have a director of public safety. I know does that, when that director of public safety is done, is there an additional administration position at the fire department? Will there be like two positions at the fire department? Like, if I think about what happened when Chief Merrill, we had the director of public safety, deputy chief or something, and then he became chief. So would we, and then I don't think there has been any additional administration on that side, or has there been that I'm not aware of, for the police?
I would say that Jeff's been doing a dual role, so there has not been any addition on either side. Because Jeff was doing fire chief things and being the director of public safety at the same time, so.
Right.
Actual cost savings, I don't know what that is, I don't know what's in Jeff's budget, but.
I guess maybe trying to understand, my understanding is that we're gonna have a fire chief and a police chief, and then we're not gonna have a director of public safety going forward. Maybe
Most likely.
okay, well, that's a possibility. So if we do that, does that ultimately create an elimination of a position administratively?
I'm interested to hear from.
Go ahead.
So it doesn't, at the oversight level, Jeff Lowe, Director of Public Safety, at the oversight level, yes, it does eliminate that higher level position. So it will reduce the salary from where I would probably be as Public Safety Director, but it won't eliminate the FTE position completely, if that makes sense to you.
So reclassification.
It'll be a reclass, yeah.
But so how many do we have? Well, we don't have a deputy chief right now.
So in the
Well, we have.
in the police department, so the way the two departments were structured prior to the consolidation of public safety was a police chief and a captain. And in the police department structure, the captain serves as the deputy chief. So in the fire structure, you have a fire chief and a deputy chief. The positions are essentially the same, it's just different titling or different ranking in how they structure the departments.
So do we have, I mean, if we're full staffed, we have those two positions currently?
Yes.
Oh, no.
So this is where it gets tricky with the whole public safety director thing, is that I am technically the fire chief. I'm the chief fire officer for the town of Orono, would be how you would look at it.
Yeah.
So hopefully, once the departments divide, which is what I would strongly encourage you to do, you will have a chief fire officer and a chief law enforcement officer, going back to the way it was before we did public safety.
Okay, so I think it's clear as mud, but so
I get it, but, yeah.
Chief Lowe,
Yes.
is it Leo okay if I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Just on the numbers again, So I understand we have 4 shifts of 6 firefighters each, which takes us to 24. And then the chief and the deputy chief, which takes us to 26.
Yep.
What's the 27th position? Because I know we actually have 27. What am I not accounting for there?
Life safety inspector.
Thank you.
And in that scenario, she just said you are the chief. Right.
I would be the chief, yes. Yep.
And before you were director of public safety, but also chief.
Right now, I'm director of public safety and also chief, but before I was director of public safety, I was the fire chief to muddy the waters a little more for me.
Okay, so we're not eliminating, we're not eliminating a position then, or is that correct?
No, you're reclassing like Councilor Demerit said, is what's happening.
Okay. All right, wishful thinking on my part.
Sorry.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Chief
So,
Lowe.
yeah, appreciate that.
And Public Safety Director Lowe.
And yeah, I put 30 in there for Public Works, half 50% position, which would be ×2 next year. Public Library, 10,000 anyway, 145, that I acknowledge that squeezing out of the operating budget was very difficult. And this seems to be another path here being proposed. What I guess is more for me, and I realize we've had this conversation. I'm gonna have it again. It still strikes me that we're having an increase of $1.2 million to our capital expenditure budget, and we don't have a director of public works.
Before we go to that, what's the, can you talk about the ski program? Because that's not a small sum of money. The operating budget, you said.
I guess that was operating, wasn't it? Yep. Yeah, so we've sorry, ski program,
Yeah.
yeah, I believe we had, it was an $88,000 increase from running the ski program. I believe.
There was an increase, yes.
What's that?
There was an increase.
Yeah,
yes.
and I think that came about because so there was a volunteer program that ran the year before. We encouraged Rec to take it over. Rec took it over. Rec was trying to be, I think, very price sensitive, which we appreciate. But I think that if it was run as a volunteer program, didn't cost the town anything. We've taken it over. We picked up 8,500. I'd like to see us maybe not be quite as generous on sponsorship or whatever we did. I'd like to see that if that 85 all was from that ski program, I'd like to see a happy medium struck there. Okay. And I think what we did was put the 85 in the budget for next year. Is that accurate? Sorry.
So the history of how the budgeting came to be is in 2023, fiscal year 23, I was instructed to have new programs in town. So we added multiple new programs, one of those being the ski program that was taken on. At the time, that money to run those new programs came out of a specific line called new programs. That line has then been reduced, and the money that I needed to make these new things happen was put into the regular programs line. So that's where that big increase comes from in that line, is it's really just a shift of what we need to operate. To the payment to the mountain specifically was about $7,200, and the bus payment to bring kids to and from was about $1,100 off the top of my head, roughly. So that's budgeted to do that. You're absolutely right. I was told when we were taking over the program from the volunteers, I met with them to gain their numbers and understand what worked and didn't work for their programming. I was told that we need to reduce the price for folks. So what we did in terms of reducing that price is we made it one flat fee. So instead of having someone pay $230 for all the things they needed from the volunteer group, we made one flat fee of $80. So that way it didn't matter if you needed a ski rental. if you needed a lesson, if you just needed the pass. We wanted to make it an equitable playing field. So that is why there was one flat price. And we did have some feedback that was helpful for a lot of families, that they didn't have to worry about their skis, and but the rental, covering that rental specifically was huge. And I didn't want families to have to choose between sending their kid with their friends that maybe had never skied before and not affording that lesson. Because they are on their own a little bit. There's volunteers and there's adults, but having that lesson was important. So that was why there was one flat rate, and that was why we had covered that cost. So that is the history of that, if that helped to clarify anything.
So that $8,000 is direct,
Yes,
other programs aside, that skiing took up the $8,000.
correct.
Okay, and who advised that that it should be cheaper? Was that the volunteers or was that?
That was between council and town management, and it was, I didn't get a number. I wasn't given a specific reduction. I looked at some of our other specialty programs, our rock climbings, are things that already involve transportation, and that's where I grabbed that number of $80, because I knew that was familiar to the community of a program of similar. There are a few other things with skiing, but the horseback ridings with transportation, those things.
To be 100% clear, I was banging the gong that we do this program. I fully support that we did this, so I'm all in. But I do think we could strike a happy medium as far as what we're sponsoring. That's what this request would be. So I mean, and like you said, it wasn't specific. You didn't have a budget to work with. I think if we have a budget and if people agree, then we'd have a budget, and that's how the cost would be back into those costs. I think that seems pretty reasonable for picking up a new program.
And just as an added point, this has no effect on scholarship. So you were still eligible for scholarship to apply to do that whole process. Just because we reduced the price to make it a flat fee, that didn't change how we handle scholarships here. So just to make that clear as well, with that reduction.
I think you did a great job taking that on, and yeah, well, I appreciate and support Leo having some questions about it, but it feels like you delivered on exactly what the council asked you to do. I mean, you could differ on what that price point should be, but that's diving into operations in a way that, yep. Thank you. Do you want to talk about the baseball field while Megan's with us?
Yeah, that's on the capital side.
Any more questions for Leo on operations before we, okay?
So on that 50,000, and I've just suggested that we reduce that to 10,000 and I think that's for a cap. You're building a reserve there to do something with the Ornovisi Little League. I've been actively involved. I support Ornovisi Little League. I think we did a great job this year. I think Public Works did rebuild, or somehow we had the whole infield. The whole infield redone, and I know there are some drainage areas that could be better, so I'm definitely familiar with the space, and I just, again, trying to reduce this capital budget down. I suggested that we cut that from 50 to 10.
What are you building the reserve for? Yeah, just anything generally, or is there a project? We might have talked about this.
So there is a specific project connected to Martin Park. I believe the last time it was formally looked at was about 2018. The park has significant drainage issues. It takes a long time for water to leave the park after the winter, which affects the field itself as well as the outfield. The previous Public Works Director did price out some of these costs. So I have a ballpark. Obviously, things have changed a little bit since that was done in 2018, but I do know the list of needs to be done. And can reprice those. The last time I did that, to the best of my ability, based off of that previous director's numbers, it landed about $300,000. And it's difficult to make any other maintenance changes to Martin Park because essentially the entire field needs to be ripped up. Drainage needs to be installed, and then you need to redo loam, grass, all those things. So in the Little League has approached me with serious concerns about the field conditions and about the conditions of some of the structures, the fences, the dugouts. The drainage project should really go first, because if we have to dig everything up, but we just bought a new dugout, we didn't just buy a new dugout, but if you do them out of order, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I put this forward to try and start that reserve, knowing that this project will get likely worse if there's continuous drainage, if there's continued erosion. So that was the intention. When the project was looked at in 2018, there was additions of a playground and a skate park and those things. I have omitted those for the sake of just the maintenance of the facility. Obviously, those can be repriced and put back in if that is council's direction with that park, but I'm specifically looking at this reserve for maintenance to make that park useful.
So that's the 300,000 just for the maintenance?
Roughly,
Yeah,
and I'm happy to give those numbers to Cornell as I don't have them in front of me, but that was what I remember. Off the top.
Roughly, I recall there's already 50,000 in there, right, from last year.
That is the ask this year. There is currently not a reserve for
At
Orono
all,
Park at
okay.
all. There is a small trails reserve, but none of the parks in town or public lands in that sense have a reserve account. So this would be kind of the first of that type of thing.
I think you and I, Leo, may have the same philosophical idea. I think we should save for these things. I think 10,000, if it's gonna cost 300,000, who knows when we'll never get that done. So I think I have a little bit different philosophical idea because I think we should be saving for these projects. And I think this is a community thing. You know, maybe we can get it done in 4 or 5 years.
It is obviously a community thing, and again,
Yeah.
I've been
I think we hear that.
on the
Yeah.
Orono VZ Little League board for 15 years, and it's playable, and it's not, I mean, it's not. I think ripping up and doing the complete restructure would be probably overkill for a Little League field, for our Little League field personally, but I think that's worth a conversation.
Yeah. I haven't used it, so you know more about it than I do.
They're playing on it now. And it depends on the season. If there's a bunch of snow, that's a long time getting off and it's gonna be flooded in the beginning, or it's gonna be wet in the beginning. But even then, we still did play on it, so. And again, the field completely rebuilt. I don't know how that happened, but it's, well, funding wise, I don't know how it happened.
So
but it's
regular-
Great that it did.
We do have small maintenance lines in Parks and Rec, and that's where the maintenance of that came from. Really, that should be done every other year, every year, depending on the use of it, to get that mound back up to where it needs to be. So.
Yeah, I mean,
So completely naive question, then we'll get off of this wormhole.
Yeah.
Of the baseball field. But you know, we've been talking about additional collaborations between the town and the university, the town and the school, et cetera. Is there any possible partnership with the school to use their fields? No.
wrong size for Little League.
See, naive question, perfect.
I have a
No matter
question
what.
about this. I have a question too.
20 feet. Council Marks.
I'm sorry, just have a question also. So if I'm hearing correctly, at saving at this rate with the 50,000 a year, it's gonna take us approximately 6 years to get to the point to have the money to do the field. Is that basically correct, Megan?
If that's the proposed math, then yes.
Okay. And I'm hearing Leo not entirely sure if the field needs to be done, but I'm assuming that staff has assessed it and feels like the field does need to be done. You're saying that was last done in 2018, Megan, the assessment on the field?
Yes, the estimates, assessments, those numbers was able to reprice some of those items and take away things like the playground structure and those types of things. So that I'm happy to provide Cornell with the information I have as updated as possible. Yeah.
I think on this one, I'm on more of Matt's belief that if staff have assessed that this needs to be done, I want to be saving for it appropriately. And I don't feel like 10,000 would be saving appropriately. But to Leo's point, I guess I have a question, probably for Cornell. If we do put this 50,000 in and then do have some further assessment done on the need to actually do this work, I assume that this 50,000 can then be used for some other Parks and Rec facilities project in the future. It would be able to be taken out of a Martin Park line and into a general somewhere else line, or what would happen with it if we put the 50,000 in this year? And in the future discussions that Leo's brought up, it's decided that in fact, it's not urgent. What happens to that money then?
I think it could be transferred with a council order.
Perfect,
also-
thank you.
Add that Megan heard from I don't know if it's the board of directors of Little League, but the Little League group who listed a number of issues they'd like to see addressed, and drainage was certainly one of them.
Yeah, I'd like us to start saving for this, and then if we need to have further discussions on the need to have those in the future, but I'm in favor of putting the 50,000 into the fund and saving at a rate that might get the project done, if it's needed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Leo, do you want to go? Well, yeah, sorry, Megan. But do you have any other things on your list here that would involve Megan, like the pool youth improvements?
Yes.
And you want to talk about those quickly?
Yeah, no, I've just,
Or you just want to?
my goal is reducing our capital budget. And I looked through lines, picked off things that I thought we could wait on or reduce. So one of them is community playground, new playground. It's on page 152. 2 items come up to, and it wasn't really clear to me what exactly we're doing there. So there were 2 items that came up to 35,000, and I'm suggesting reducing that by 15,000 again. I don't know exactly what we're doing.
And to be fair, we didn't prep Megan for the conversation.
So,
Oh, she knows.
so
You're
the,
a good town manager.
so the community playground is the yellow and blue one down at the bottom of the hill here. I would strongly recommend retaining the funds, just continue to save for that one. I am often repairing it. I think at the last meeting I said I didn't have to repair it, and then I did. So, it does happen. It is aging. They don't last forever. The other thing about the playground we currently have, it is not incredibly ADA accessible. So in looking at building a new playground, we've already started saving for such a thing. So keeping that in mind and knowing ours is not only aging but dated. It is obviously a very central location for town. It's used by school kids. If we're looking to keep a playground, that would be the one, and retaining those funds is important.
Can you just
Um,
clarify?
Go ahead.
So is community playground / new playground, is that both that spot?
No,
Oh,
so the new playground was, the new playground line you see in the budget was attributing to add an additional playground somewhere in town. So that was the direction of the previous public works director. That was something the town had goals for, to increase the use of our parks and to increase amenities in neighborhoods and things. So that was where that addition came from. It is a brand new, non-existent, no planned location playground. That would be up to council's direction as to how that would be implemented.
sorry, I somehow forgot my budget line there. And so the total was 35, was one of those, what was the new one?
The new one was the start of that fund. So the
What was that? 45.
25,
$1,000 to start a new playground fund.
correct.
So it's 25 and 10 for the upkeep of what's there, is that right?
So the,
25 and 15, Leo.
Okay,
so the continuous savings, you'll see in past years too, the community playground has a continued account that we've continued to save for a few years. That I would highly encourage keeping, as it's already saved and we already have it and we already need to maintain it. To add a new playground would be a council direction as to the service,
Yeah.
the levels
Okay.
and things you would want. So that,
Got it.
that's the.
thanks for
Thank
the
you.
clarification there. So I guess if we don't have a location, we don't know where it's going. I would say probably keep the maintenance on that, and let's pull that would be my suggestion. Pull the new one that's not a plan right now.
I like that idea.
There have been savings so far for new playgrounds ongoing, or when did?
I believe this was the first year we had started the new playground fund.
Yeah.
And the community playground, that yellow one, hasn't existed yet. So that one has already existed. This was an the new playground was an introduction this year. That was made by our previous public works director when he worked on the historic capital plan. So that was the year this was planned to be presented.
So that didn't come out of nowhere,
Yeah.
just so we're clear.
Right.
There were multiple community conversations about more than one playground and having a playground someplace, and the discussions were happening. I think we had even attempted to put it in the budget previously and it got cut. So that has been something that has been talked about, having multiple playgrounds, so you just didn't have one here and it was more accessible other places. One of those places was talked about was Martin Park. There was also other places that were talked about, but those came out of community meetings, and that came out of a desire of a previous council to look at the potential of moving that. So I just want to be clear that that didn't just kind of manifest.
No, appreciate that.
Understood, it wasn't suggesting that that would be the case, but where it is not. I did remember, I thought I remembered Martin Park being part of something over there. And then even just Webster side, I think some community members over there were asking about it, and which again was Martin Park, but
What amount do you think you'd like to be saving toward for a new playground, wherever it goes?
A new playground or?
The new one that we were just discussing, the
So-
potential new one.
How much does the playground cost?
A lot. A lot. Playgrounds cost a lot.
Per playground?
The playground we currently have, the yellow and blue one, if we were to one for one replace it, it's probably close to $400,000 to one to replace that. That one's quite large. There's a lot of kind of different elements to it. So it depends on the size. It depends on maybe the need in that community. You'll notice that our playground is more focused at older kids, whereas the school's playground is more focused at younger kids, just the elements they both include. So it's meant for different age groups. So it can vary, but playgrounds are quite expensive. In a perfect world, I would take the money we currently have saved for the community playground to be redone, and attempt to see if there are grants available, that sort of thing, to try and increase our funding once we've come to the end of our savings cycle with that, because it won't be enough to replace what we have, but to see what else is available if we wanted that same size.
I'd like to move forward with what staff's recommended on that line, knowing that, ultimately we're gonna have decisions to make around our recreation, with the Martin Park, and there's $20,000 for a skateboard park that's in the reserves that,
Is it up to 25 in skate park reserve?
I think it's 20, but
I thought it was 18 something.
Council allocated.
Oh, we.
What's that?
okay.
yeah,
So there's a private donation reserve that has about 18,000, and then council allocated an additional 20,000 to that reserve as well.
Thank you.
okay. What's that?
So it's 38.
Nice. I like the idea of leaving it, but we could,
I would like to leave it. I mean, it sounds like community has said multiple times it's something they'd like to see. And this seems like a very reasonable, actually very small start to saving for what would be a big project. It seems like a responsible way to get started on it.
all right, you wanna jump into,
Well, one more
Sure.
for Megan, I think the pool youth improvements. I think, what is that?
So we've done a lot of talking about the large part of the pool. There is a smaller kiddie pool. And although they are right next to each other, the infrastructure is different. So that's why you're seeing a separate line here that says youth pool, because there are a lot of things that are separate about those two things, even though they're right next to each other. We're not currently using the pool because the infrastructure is not working, the pipes and the systems. So knowing that pool repair was needed, that is why the revenue account exists. There had been different conversations as to replacing it, as to paving the whole thing and making more splash pad type area. Different things come with different prices and different requirements. Something like a splash pad in that area would be potentially costly if I need to add a second pump room. And that was something that I would need experts to come in and assist to give recommendations on. So that was I believe that the funds for this fiscal year were attributed to specifically repair the current broken infrastructure in that kiddie pool arrangement. But there has been multiple discussions over the years of, well, what if it doesn't have to be that? From a staffing standpoint, it's a little bit tricky because it is standing water. So that would mean I need extra lifeguards and extra visibility in that space because there is standing water versus a splash pad. You don't need some of those things because the water's moving and there's nothing standing. So there are some regulations on how you have to treat and take care of different water elements, but that is why you're seeing that separately and not with the pool project that is currently happening.
So what does that 60,000 do?
So
Does
that
get that kiddie pool back up and running?
it could, I need to have, I know that there is some broken infrastructure. I need to have someone come in and assess it. So that would be part of this $60,000 and then continue the repairs. If we wanted to take a different direction, that is why I talked about other options there.
And anything over $7,500 in costs come back to the council anyway for approval, right?
Correct.
So. Anything else for, and I don't want to cut anything short in terms of, but is there anything that anyone else needs to hear on this from Megan? Thank you for the information and your advocacy, appreciate it. How about these other topics? Anybody need to hear anything? Leo, do you want to?
I mean, I guess if nobody wants to entertain anything, then there's no point in going through it, and that's kind of where think I'm hearing, so. that's
Yeah,
fine.
I'm sorry, Megan had to be the person to go through it, but if someone wants to hear anything else on the.
Yeah, I mean, the public works truck, the facilities, cruiser, I mean, those are big expenses, and then getting back to Webster, I'd like to get a sense as to if that's actually gonna happen and I know we don't know, it's impossible to know that.
Do you want to
but
start with Webster first then and then? come
That's the
back?
biggest one, yeah, let's get in that.
So we don't know, right?
I think we do. We've heard that there's no one bidding on the full job for this year.
Do I see
We
Chris
don't know.
back there? Is it-
Yes, there is actually.
Chris, do you want to come up? Will you mind coming up with us? Thank you.
There are two people,
Can you introduce yourself too? And
Yep.
Thank you.
Chris Brown, BPCL. Two contractors have committed to bid on the project. Both of them want to bid now and do the work in 25.
Year 25 or fiscal 25?
Year 25.
Okay, so next year. Okay,
And you do have to, the ARPA money has to be committed to a signed contract.
Yep.
Before the end of the year, or we lose it.
Yep.
So that's,
But once they commit to it, they have, I think, 2 years to spend it, going into 26.
So
so my proposal here is that we commit to spending all of the ARPA funds on Webster side somehow. And also, we look at breaking those jobs up and getting something done this year. That's my proposal.
but one of the things that Dan and I had talked about, and I don't know if this is possible given the different funding sources, but if this project isn't truly going to happen until next year, can we split up the funding of it between 2 years to reduce some of the budget volatility that we're seeing? So, we are agreeing to do the project. And we're going to, reserve for half of it this year out of this year's budget, and then the remaining half will come out of next year's budget. Is that possible?
Well,
You just had a big spike next year.
it's total.
Well, no, because we'd have half, we'd have half.
A lot of it's in reserve.
The money is totally funded now, with the
So-
ARPA money is totally
It's
funded.
not gonna
so
affect
It would just sit there until we spend it.
tax rate.
But I thought looking at this, it looks like only half of the project is currently coming out of reserves, the other half is coming out of this year's budget.
My share of the project is ARPA and reserves.
Okay,
Public Works share is reserves and the remaining funds from a bond from another project. There was money left on an infrastructure project. And we're already paying that loan now. And they can use that money for other infrastructure. And it was selected for this project here.
I mean, there's some paving.
So,
Originally, we wanted to do it with all ARPA money. And the council didn't want to use all the ARPA money for this project. So that's why we took money out of the reserves to make up for the ARPA money that we weren't getting. And we also reduced the size of the project. We took elements out of it.
I remember that. We didn't want
So
to use
can
it
I-
all. But I think times have changed. We're kind of getting up against it as far as having to commit the money. So I kind of been feeling, and I think there's also whether we commit all of it to Webster side. And then I think you had some other like infrastructure stuff that I assume would qualify the drying stuff. And again, kind of saving reserves and just committing what we can get done with ARPA funds. That's where I'm thinking.
Sarah, do you have something for us?
Yeah, so Leo, I guess I'm not understanding. What Cornell explained is what makes sense, or what Chris has explained is what makes sense to me. None of the funding for this is coming from people's taxes this year. It's coming from money that already exists from previous bonds and in our capital infrastructure reserve. So it's not spiking people's taxes this year. And I don't see what the advantage is to saying, well, we won't take it all out of reserves this year. We'll wait and we'll take it out next year. Either way, it's coming out if we're going to do this project. So are you
No.
actually suggesting that we don't do this project, half of it?
No, and that's not, but I think that where the funding is coming from is not really as relevant, because we're gonna spend $3.2 million. Let's spend $2 million. And let's spend ARPA funds. Let's not spend down our capital. Next year, we get half of it done. Then next year we look, and again, it's a new budget season. So I don't think it's still taxpayer dollars that are sitting in reserves and in this other fund. So we're taxpayer dollars. I understand, and I'm not suggesting that it's hitting the taxpayers, our rates this year. But that's not really the discussion. We're talking about spending.
Yeah, I understand, Leo. Sorry, I think it was Jacob who talked about the spikiness. I just heard coming from somewhere. I don't really think the spikiness is an issue. I think the issue is you're saying, well, if we're only doing half of this, then next year, maybe we don't decide to do the other half. Maybe we spend it somewhere else. And I hear that. That's totally legit. I don't think that's where I'm at. I think this is a project that staff has decided needs to be done. And I think that the full project needs to be done. And I've heard from staff that there's a cost saving to doing it all at once as opposed to in stages. So I would be in favor of moving forward with this project as originally presented in the budget. And I'm done. Thank you.
So Rob's voicing agreement. I'll say we've already, Leo, we had a vote on this back in our meeting you brought forward the idea of, how Public Works could do more of this. And we had an order before us at our special town council meeting on April 22nd, where we voted to refer this kind of exploration to the finance committee in terms of splitting the work up and having Public Works do more of it. And that's something we can, have as part of our work plan. We have an RFP out that people are responding to, and we hope perhaps even more people respond to. So I'm just cautious about, I support moving forward with what staff has given us so far. And I definitely don't want to send a signal to someone who's sharpening their pencil to try and win our work that, for some reason, council may pull its approval of moving forward with this important project away. So that's just kind of where I'm at. And it feels like that's probably the sense of the council as well. All right. Is there anything else that we're going to talk about in terms of Leo's proposal?
Yeah, I've reduced on the Public Works truck. I've removed that medium duty truck, and on the facilities truck, I've suggested that we use the retired police vehicle instead of buying a new truck for facilities. No appetite? That's fine.
Okay. All right. So are we ready to move on and give staff direction based on our earlier conversation? Thank you I appreciate you bringing it. I know it's hard to be the one. I lose sometimes 6-1 too.
Leo, Dan, can I just ask those two things that Leo just went over very fast? I don't even understand what's being suggested there. When you say remove, Leo, you're suggesting that we never replace this truck and that Public Works then has one less truck to work with? Or what does remove mean?
I'm suggesting we don't this year, Sarah.
Okay, yeah, I'm not in favor of that then. I don't want to keep just kicking things down the road. If there's a proposal about something that's not needed, I would want to hear that. If one of these was something that you think is not needed, I'd want to hear from you and from staff about that. But if it's just about delaying, got organized schedules from staff about how to keep replacing regularly to keep on track. So
Yeah.
is one of these something you're just suggesting we simply don't need at all? Or,
This year, Sarah, I'm trying to reduce the capital budget this year.
okay, yeah,
It's next year, yeah, it's kicking it down to next year, maybe, I don't know. But they're vehicles, so it's not gonna be, we're never gonna buy them. But maybe we get another year out of a vehicle, that's what I'm suggesting.
that helps, Leo. Thanks. I didn't understand.
All right, so, thank you, Leo. We do have, as part of this, we have to also talk about the fee schedule for 24-25 and proposed changes. That's in the agenda that was printed. Does staff have anything for us on that? I have something on the electricity charging that I'm bringing in from Tony. But, that Mitch has been on those emails before, so I know where.
No, just staff recommendations are on that list.
Yeah. So we've had, anybody have anything on those lists, staff recommendations for the fee, various fees?
Question on the minimum sewer charge. I know that we're bringing it up in response to the increase in the sewer rate, but is there any way to maintain that at the 75? And the reason I ask that is that, so my household of two has been at that minimum charge and we can afford it, that's fine. But I'm thinking, a retired couple on a fixed income or something to that extent probably is using the same amount of water we are, so they're paying the minimum charge as well. So is there a way to leave that minimum charge?
Minimum is based on 100 cubic feet, so that's 100
Yeah.
cubic feet 12 times.
Mhm.
The only way to leave that number there is to just change that figure.
Can that be done?
It can be done if council decides to do it, I guess.
It just,
We'd
I
have to-
mean,
I think
we're
we'd have
only
to
talking about
change-
$6, I get it, but
It would take an ordinance change, I believe.
That's gonna take you 6 months. So, no, someone who's been trying to change an ordinance for a year now, I can tell you, it won't take 6 months, but it'll take. Yep. All right, thank you.
And you get charged that just for being hooked up, whether there's no water going, so
Well,
that's a minimum.
I know.
Just for being hooked up, so.
So, and we'll have a public hearing on this next week, so people could come in. We have a public hearing next week, right? And this is approved as part of the budget. That's the mechanics of this, Cornell, and.
Public hearing next week, yeah.
Yeah. So, I know, anybody else have anything on the fees they want to talk about before I bring up Tony Francis' concern? So, Tony's been in touch with us. And Tony, as you know, is on the search advisory committee, does the lights on Stillwater. And he shared concerns about how our charging fees of, I think it's $3 per hour or maybe kilowatt hour compared to other, like I guess at the university is $1.50. He's not here to advocate, and I'm gonna encourage him strongly to come to the public. Perhaps the public hearing is the best chance for that, so I don't have to try and make his case for him, but I'm certainly sympathetic to what he shared in terms of our fees. And I'd like to understand if our fees are set as they are by some kind of contractual reason or because of our cost structure is different than the universities, that's one thing. I just don't know. And I think it's council's decided in the past. And I will think it makes sense to try and be comparable to other.
So is that to plug these Stillwater trail lights into?
No, it's to plug in an EV, electric vehicle. At our, by the library, that's from here.
Oh, okay, the chargers down here, okay,
Yep.
all right.
Is that a pass-through expense? or
I don't know how that works.
Do we make money on that? Does anyone know that?
We're looking at Mitch Stone for those at home who.
So Megan has all this information and did all the work.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about it, but we can certainly get that. My understanding was council arrived at the fees after getting all the information from Megan, and some of the increased amount was to recoup some of the costs it was to put those in.
Yeah.
And maintenance costs. That was not something that was arrived at by staff, that was
Sure.
presented, and that's how it came. So I can certainly have Megan give Megan to give Cornell the information, and you guys can review it and
Sure.
then decide from there what you think.
Yeah.
Sign for Monday.
Okay, thank you. And I've been in touch with Tony, let him know that next week's the week. He had a concern about it and just want to make sure people who have a concern are heard. And I don't necessarily have to carry his water for him, but I just want to make sure he's heard. Okay, anything else on how about the Orono Village District Development Plan for FY 2025? Anything from staff on that?
So it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Certainly.
I had just one.
Council Marks.
Mitch, I just had one, which was I think when we've seen this the last few times, we keep getting this citation about that the association was dissolved with the intention to look forward to whether an association was needed or a similar association. I don't know the exact wording, but is there like a timeline on that or a plan on that of when those discussions would happen about whether some new group would be convened, or are we assuming it's sort of indefinitely on hold at this point, or just is there any update about that you could provide?
So about the time that I had kind of transitioned to the deputy director role, this conversation was happening. The village association that was created because there was a problem downtown. And when it got dissolved, one of the founding members said, well, when we can't find any problems that we feel need to be addressed, there really isn't a need for us. And so that's what caused some of the issues. Part of the challenge was that we're really only focusing on the downtown, and we thought, well, if we can have a greater Orono business community kind of group. We've had some conversations about that. We had some right after the time. And one of the things that makes that successful is when business owners want and are invested in that happening. We can try to put that together, but that makes it staff running a meeting and begging people to come, because some of the other issues, we've got a lot of small businesses. So finding a time to make that work. I've left it on the table and kind of ask question when problems start to come up and they seem to be common. I ask questions about, hey, would it be helpful if we all got together? And I never get this overwhelming, hey, that sounds like a great thing. So I think it's a good idea to keep it there, to keep talking about it. But there hasn't been a lot of traction around it. So it has not been a priority to kind of keep pushing.
Thank you, Mitch. That totally answers what I was looking for. I appreciate it. I just didn't know the backstory. Very helpful.
I can get in the middle of it if you want me to, but we can probably just pass this budget and try and get the new town manager. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so we're wrapping the, oh, Sarah, do you have a question or something else? Sarah, please.
Yeah, just before we wrap up the budget discussions, I do want to draw council's attention to the fact that I sent an email to the council before the meeting saying that I would bring this up, that Jacob and I worked to create a tax impact page. I don't know, nearly 2 months ago now, which I would really like to request be shared out with the public at next week's meeting. I'd also like to formally request that next year we share this page out at the start of our budget discussions, not at the end. I think it's really important, as we speak as a council so much about transparency and community involvement and participation. It's very hard to be involved in the budget process when what all these numbers that are getting thrown around actually mean for a typical household budget is nowhere presented. So if you look in the email, Jacob worked hard on it. I worked hard on it. The numbers have all been rechecked multiple times. They are approximate numbers, but they are accurate numbers. And I would like to suggest that we put this out next week so that as we discuss as a council, whether we're cutting 100,000 out of the budget or $1 million out of the budget or adding the equivalent, people actually know what that means for them as part of this discussion.
We can, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for keeping this in front of us. We can certainly make it a part of the budget hearing next week, and the materials that we, Cornell and I started having a conversation today about what would be the presentation coming out of this meeting. And so we'll work collaboratively with his office in terms of what we bring to the community as part of our budget presentation next week. And this will certainly be a part of it. And then how we'll present the budget that Cornell and his team and our town team have developed with our input here. So that'll be certainly a part of it. Thank you. So turning to the left side of the table, Zach and Cornell, do you have what you need from us from tonight in terms of, it feels like the next step is maybe to send us back an update to the calculations based on what you heard from us tonight, so we can check it and use that as the basis for next week's public hearing?
Yes, when we'll have a list of items, pluses and minuses, and have that for Monday
Okay,
and its effect on the tax rate.
okay, great. Good. Well, thank you to those who attended and participated, and thank you very much to the staff. Budgets are never easy, and, hopefully we've got a compromise that positions our town and our staff and our new town managers with some opportunities moving forward. I don't know, we didn't get into the budget initiatives that were part of the memo that Jacob and I, I feel like we're out of energy for that, further conversations right now, but those will be things that I think we'll want to talk about as we get ready to finalize the budget and our final vote on it at the end of June. Anybody have a lot of energy around digging into those right now? Nope. Okay. So, the town manager, the town council chair and town manager updates. Cornell, do you have something for us? Do you want to go with the R2 quarter thing first, or?
Yeah, want Mitch to bring you up to date.
Oh, Councilor Mark.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand fast enough, but I guess I'm confused. If we don't talk about those initiatives today, then is that just an assumption that they're just moving forward, right, in the budget presentation as presented to us, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have a budget hearing as kind of ideas council is considering for FY25 and part of our work plan with our new town manager. So things like the pilot project and collaboration with the RSU, things like that. So. Yep.
And the only other thing we haven't talked about at all is just Orono stops that has a cost to it, correct?
We're gonna talk about that as part of the town chair update very briefly in a minute.
Okay,
So
great. That's the only thing I was curious about. That one had a cost, so I was hoping I was gonna hear something about it. I think it sounds interesting. Thank you.
thank you. Mitch?
I just wanted to give you an update on timeline with the Route 2 corridor project, where we are in that planning partnership. The next step that's kind of going on now is I am reaching out to property owners that may have some impact. There aren't a lot, but may have some impact, so that they're aware of what during these concept plans might come out, so that they can respond in a way and give their feedback, so they're not taken by surprise. July 15th, we're gonna have a presentation of the concept plans to the council by Sebago, and we will also have the state planners with us. And then July 24th, we'll have a public meeting, where after that meeting with the council, we will make the concept plans public so that everybody can see them. And then on the 24th, we're gonna have a public meeting to kind of go through those concept plans and kind of explain what's there and get some feedback from that. And then ultimately, the timeline was September is where we were looking to have the planning portion kind of finished up. During the conversation with Sebago and the state planners about kind of next steps, we were always under the impression that we would finish this and then they give it to them and it would go to them to put forth a grant. I was informed, we were informed that apparently engineering needs to be done before they put this grant forward, which is a 50-50 match with the state. And its engineering costs are the 10% of the project, which would make that cost at 1.5 million if it was a $30 million project. So I was not happy. I made a few phone calls to other people that have gone through this, and apparently they were told late, and you have the state coming to you on the 15th. So you were open to ask those questions as to why we were in this place, but I wanted you to be aware that there is an additional cost that was not discussed. And it's a cost that is put up front before you even apply for the funds, which make that a little bit more of a challenge. Okay, I think if you were looking, if from the beginning, if this cost was there and we talked about it, still on a $30 million project, $4.5 million isn't horrible, but at the end of the day, we're a small community that these are challenges for. So I am trying to work through this with them. But I wanted you to be aware that this was a surprise. I have called everyone involved with this program and asked several times if anybody knew anything, and the answer was no. And other projects also found out after certain periods of time, through the process, not upfront, about this engineering piece. So I would say, well, we'll call it a miscommunication. I don't know that it's that, but I'm gonna call it a miscommunication with the state about that information. And I am working through, okay, well, what does this mean? I mean, can we not move forward until we come up with a certain amount of money to be able to do that engineering? So I've asked some questions to try to get some answers, but the state will be here, and I've informed the individual with the state that has given me this information that you probably all will have some questions about this. So, but I wanted you to be aware of that because that's not an insignificant piece of information.
So is it your understanding that we'll have to put up over $1 million to do the engineering before we know whether we'll be funded?
So that was how it was presented to me.
Seems ridiculous.
I would agree with you. I think there was some conversation with that, the person that I discussed about, well, there are ways to work through it, but he didn't really explain that. Hard and truth fact is, if you're telling me that 10% of the total cost of the project is in engineering, and that's at $3 million, and we owe 50%, we owe 50%. I don't know when we have to pay that. I don't know how, and maybe that can be negotiated, but he didn't give an answer to that. So I've asked some other questions about how do other communities dealt with this? What are other options? Because to me, I feel even bad having this conversation with you, is it's not like I came and said, we're gonna have to pay $50,000 more before we do this. So I think that I don't want to derail the interest in moving this forward. But certainly that is a new piece, and to be fair, with some of the other communities, we're actually learning before they did. Gives us a little bit of a heads up, but not as much as, I mean, they completed their project and found out.
Okay.
So I'm giving you that heads up. I don't want this to slow it down because I think there's some good ideas. I think there's probably a path forward, but I think we need to understand what that is from the state perspective.
Okay.
This is new information that I knew nothing about, and I will tell you, no one here knew anything about prior to that conversation 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So.
Just a simple,
Is
by the
there
way.
Mitch,
Sarah?
Yeah.
is there a deadline by which we have to apply for this Route 2 corridor grant? I understand that we're gonna wait and hear about this 1.5 million, which you're right, is really scary. If that's something we would maybe not even get any, I mean, if our grant was denied, we would just be out that with no product, but I'm not remembering, and I'm sure you've told us many times, what is the actual date by which we have to apply for this grant, or is this ongoing?
So it's yearly, and the reason why we had this timeline set up is because if we were able to get the information to the state by September, they could formulate a grant application for around the November deadline, and then they'd find out in January of that thing. And so if we missed the November, which if you remember, this has been a little bit of elongated because we didn't hit the last November, so we had some time, so we kind of took our time. The challenge is that at the end of the day, even the engineering, take the cost out, you can't do it in the winter because a lot of that has to do with surveying stuff. So depending upon the window there, you're probably looking at a full year anyways, before you could get that done. But once again, I don't know the intricacies of that. I'm trying to work through that right now. It's been about 2 weeks since I got the information, and I'm trying to get some better news than that. So I'm working at that, but
It's not
Thank
easy
you.
news, just appreciate you bringing it to us.
that's what's there.
Thank you.
We, yeah,
Can I just ask, approximately how many homeowners are you having to reach out to and?
most of, it's not homeowners, realistically, it's more businesses. There's only a few that,
Do?
yep. Yep, and all of their suggestions, so just a general statement, when you have multiple entrances to a property, it makes it more dangerous. So if you're trying to make it a safer corridor, you would look at trying to reduce the number of entrances on, whether it's driveways, whether it's those sorts of things. So they're gonna do their due diligence and put those in as options, but they're not necessarily gonna happen. Some of the intersection stuff is where trying to make those safer, sometimes you need a little bit more space. So.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Mitch. Anything else there? Okay, Cornell, anything else on your report before I turn to these two quick things? I'll turn to them quickly. So first, I'd like to, from the chair report, we had, one of the challenges with these agendas, we put them out on Thursday and Friday is an off day for the office and then it's Monday and here we are. So, this morning I put, some material into Cornell around, what I'm calling the Orono Stops initiative that we've been discussing in terms of building on the good work that Chief Merrill and his team has done with the, enhanced enforcement, but also having a campaign style initiative where we'd ideally work with the university and other partners to really make it clear that Orono prioritizes and have a culture of sharing the roadways and safety. So I've got that in front of Cornell and the staff is looking at that. So I'd bring something back after they've had a chance to kind of assess it a little bit. So that's where I am with that. We do have $5,000 in the budget to support enhanced enforcement details, and we can work with the department and the new town manager on what that would look like once we get more feedback. So I don't have anything more for you until I hear back from the team. I did want to update you that I attended the Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant webinar last week. It was really interesting in terms of what communities are the federal resources that are available to communities to address crossing safety. And what I'd like to do is work with the staff. There's a timeline. They haven't announced the upcoming request for proposals, but it's coming. It's gonna be this summer. It's a 75-day window to put together a grant, and it's about, partnership. And I'd be interested in bringing it to the council as something we could pursue and potentially, get federal resources to address some of our crossing issues. We have all these issues, and as you know from our meeting with the railroad company earlier in the spring, they plan to get up to 49 miles an hour at the crossings. And that's fast. It's twice as fast as we allow the cars to go through those neighborhoods. So I think that's something that's it's worth exploring, see if we could at least get some federal resources to help address those concerns.
Of course, that's gonna become I would imagine a bigger public issue as train speeds increase and more trains come through, so.
Yeah.
Who was the staff that we would be taxing for this?
Well, I'm talking to the town manager first, and whoever the town manager would want to have, help look at potentially developing a grant proposal.
And did you say, is it crossing elimination?
Well, it's a crossing elimination grant program that includes barriers and things like that. So, in some communities where they have like tremendous bottlenecks around like a trainway, like a freight yard, is that what they're called? You're a train guy, What are they called?
So that was the track switchers.
Track switchers. So like the other places that have huge traffic jams because trains get stuck in the middle of roads while they're switching. So they do things like build bridges and tunnels and stuff like that to try and eliminate the crossings altogether. That seems like beyond our aspirations in Orono. If we put 6 tunnels, first email, like, you want to move these, come on, demerit, he said. But in terms of like barriers and things like that, and I see it as a step towards both making the crossings that we have safer for pedestrians, bikes and cars, but also maybe getting us a step closer to being able to be a quiet zone where we don't have to have the whistles.
So barriers, it could be something like making sure they all have those.
Yep, just like that. So are there other, they're ding, 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 like that? Yeah.
Thanks.
I understand you can't hear the trains from Winter Haven, but I understand Councilor Baker is still.
Actually, you still can, you can hear them, yeah.
If the wind's blowing the right way?
Yeah.
You can hear it from Mill Street.
I bet you did.
So Dan,
Yeah.
Dan, Leo's question was my question. So it also includes barriers potentially for making crossings safer. And did you say that somehow that might connect to the whether we're allowed to become a quiet zone? If the barriers are in place, a certain number or something, you're allowed to apply for quiet zone or something? Is that what you said?
Right, no, at some point you have to establish a certain level of safety at your, and I'm not an expert on it yet, and it would be something, I'd be interested in learning more about and being a resource if the town, because we'll need partners, we'd have to, the communities have been successful, have partnerships around these types of grants, so, between the good folks at CSX, who I know want to be really good neighbors to the people of Orono, the university and, other stakeholders, I think we could have some opportunities.
That doesn't like the car street. I think we just reroute the train down Main Street. Now we know cars.
But, all right, so that's all I have for that. And I apologize for putting them on the agenda without more material, but we're doing the work, so. Yep. Anything else for, public comment? If there's anyone who'd like to make a public comment, now's a good time. Pete, do we have any hands raised online?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
Can I'll point out that Lisa sent a really nice email that I was perusing right before the meeting about the.
Yes, thank you, Lisa.
Good words out of my mouth. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Mitch, I was just hoping to add to this conversation, because I think it's important, and I just want you to be aware of this. When staff puts together their budgets, they look at a work plan in which they can put the money together with what the work they can do. And council has a number of initiatives that land under the council flag, which all need some sort of staff support for, which is not in the work plans that we've created. Okay, so when you look at removing these positions or not funding positions, that becomes challenging for us we're doing more, okay, by doing that, and whether it's a shift or not. So I just want you to think about that as you go through this process of trying to figure out, and I'm all for new manager, we need to figure out a new way. We need to, you guys have new initiatives. We were built a different way. We need to fix that, okay? But I think at the end of the day, it's important to remember that when you guys come up with ideas and there's staff involvement,
Right.
we have not factored that into our work plans.
Yep.
So that just means that's on top of what's already there. So I just want to bring that to light through this process.
I think that's an incredibly important point. I appreciate you bringing it for all the staff who are here now and who maybe have left already tonight. And I don't know what we do in terms of being open. I know some of us have talked about being open to, what kind of changes do we need to have in the clerk's office, for instance, around their staffing challenges until we do this central office review, if it means a lunch hour closure or so, things like that. So, I mean, I know I'm open to hearing what staff needs to be able to, because I know we're still thin. And I know that I'm certainly open to that, and I do appreciate the point. Yes, Sarah, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask a question. So, and also just for the public who's listening, my understanding is the only council initiative on here that's new is this Orono Stops initiative and the railroad grants that you're talking about. And the Orono Stops initiative comes with 5,000 in funding to pay for extra police details. The other council initiatives like the community surveys and evaluations were part of last year's budget. And we were specifically told last year that with our new communications director position in place, one of the things that would create the staff time to be able to handle the community surveys and the 360 evaluations. So I guess, Dan, I'm just wanting to be clear for myself as I'm looking at your list. I don't see any other council initiatives there other than the community surveys and evaluations, which we were told last year we had the staffing to do. And now the Orono Stops initiative, which comes with additional funding. So the only thing I see is just your railroad grant. Is there something else I'm missing that's a community initiative, a council initiative? Pardon me.
And then
I just want to weigh in that, I mean, I think honestly, I guess you're talking about today in what he just presented, but to me, it feels like every meeting we do come away with a new initiative, and we often try to take it on, I think. as a council, like this, you know, we're gonna do this, but I think it does end up trickling down often where there's some element of staff, and it feels like every meeting there is something. I feel, that's what it feels like, and I can't put my finger, I can't tell you what it was each meeting, but I think if you go back and look at most of our meetings, we're coming away with a new initiative or a new something that we're asking staff to chase down, so I think the request is legitimate that just came forward, or it wasn't even a request, it was just being cognizant. I mean, I've been saying it too, a lot, and you know, probably guilty, but also saying this next breath, saying it, that we need to be cognizant of running staff ragged, especially now. And
100%.
not gonna open right up when we get a new full-time town manager, but I think if we're honest with ourselves, we come out of most meetings with something. And it trickles down to staff. And I think that's all great stuff. I think we have to curb our expectations and not be piling things on every meeting. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Thanks,
We'll be
Joe.
different.
That's really helpful. And I just want to say that I wasn't trying to claim that there's not a problem. I just wanted to actually follow up by understanding for myself. Is there something being added to this budget that we should be aware of and be thinking about funding that I'm missing? So I'm not critiquing that there've been other things during the year. That sounds, I respectfully understand that staff are telling us their truth. And I just wanted to be sure I'm not missing anything in the budget. So Dan, I'm not missing anything in this budget, correct? It's just the Orono stops, the surveys and evaluations, and then whatever you just brought up about train grants. Am I missing something?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of the council initiatives in the budget are, you know, essentially it's the staff presented budget, but we've also, you know, being mindful that, you know, we've had really important staff transitions that have left holes in the staff, and, you know, and then the basin boat launch project and, you know, we're doing a lot of different things. We're an activist council, certainly, so I'm certainly aware of that, and I appreciate that. And I think Mitch brings a point that's important for us to hear. And just remember, you know, in terms of.
And to your point, Sarah, when you approved that last year, those things you did last year, we had an assistant town manager. Okay, so when that budget was approved, there was a high level, and the payroll clerk is not doing this stuff. Right, so I think that's the thing to remember, and I'm not saying, these are just food for thought as we go through this, that we have to remember that there is this balance between service and people.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mitch. That was really helpful clarification. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I guess that wraps up 6:58, 2 minutes of your life back. Thank you, everybody, and we'll adjourn this committee meeting. Thank you for all the good work. Yep. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sonia. Yeah.
That was all you.